February 2015. It is 9:23 AM New Zealand Daylight Saving Time, and we've got a little bit of very light cloud at the moment. So I'm filming through a Canon Legria FS200 standard video camera, and as you can see I'm moving around to see if there's anything next to the sun that remains there, and I can't see anything there. You can see a lot of glare from the sun. We've got some lens flares that are moving around as to be expected. And now I'm going to drop in the welder's lens in front of the camera and let the camera adjust itself with the auto exposure. Now, as you can see, with the lens fitted in place, we can still see some of the scenery, especially the silhouettes of the trees and so on. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on the sun. This is on manual focus at the moment, set to infinity, and auto exposure. So I'm going to zoom in onto the sun until it suddenly becomes clear, and then I'm going to lock the exposure. Okay, so now that the sun is nice and clear, I'm going to lock the exposure so it doesn't go and change on us when I zoom out, and that'll hold that nice and clear without all that glare that we were seeing. Now I'm going to move the camera around to see if there's anything next to the sun, up, down, left, right and so on. I'll zoom it out further so we've got a wider view, and as we can see, there's no second sun there, there's no Nibiru. We could see the scenery of the trees and so on before. Let me zoom right out. Okay, now we can see just how tiny the sun really is, the actual apparent size of the disk when all the glare is removed. Because when we're looking at the sun, most of what appears to be the sun is actually glare, which is caused by scattering of the sunlight as it passes through our atmosphere and is refracted. Okay, so we can see this tiny little dot that's about half of 1 degree across if we were to measure it as an angle. And that's about the same size as the moon, of course, which is why during a solar eclipse, total solar eclipse, the moon is able to block out the disk of the sun. So I'm going to take the exposure off the manual setting where it's locked, and you'll see the camera adjust itself. And then when all of that glare of the sun comes in, you'll see that the sun's disk actually looks a lot bigger than what we're seeing here. So here we go. Right, you see the camera adjusting itself, and now the sun looks a whole lot bigger. So once again, you can see the scenery, moving the camera around. There's no sign of any second sun or any other object. Now with the finger test, you need to hold your finger well out in front of the camera and not between the camera and the lens. Now in this case, the lens is mounted hard up against the end of the camera. It's nice and flush, so there's no gap between the welder's lens and the camera. But if I were to do the finger test, I would hold my finger right out in front of the camera and put it over the disk of the sun, which is right in the centre there. And remember that most of what we're seeing around the outside, well, all of what we're seeing around the outside is actually glare, it's not the sun. So the actual the disk is obscured behind my finger. Now if there was a second sun, apparent second sun object, I would actually be moving my finger so that, okay, there's a little lens flare there. Okay, we see that lens flare. Now if the object seemed to stay in the same place relative to the sun when I move the camera around and appeared to be a second sun, what I would want to do there is to actually put my finger where the lens flare is and see if it's superimposed over my finger, as in fact we see right there. Okay, we can see those little spots are superimposed over my finger, which proves that those spots that we're seeing here are actually lens flares. Okay, so there's two parts to the finger test. The first part is to put your finger over the disk of the sun to make sure that the second object actually disappears, and the second part is to put your finger over where the second object appears to be to see if it's blocked out or is superimposed over your finger, as we see here. Okay, now I'm thinking that in Tim's video he is actually putting his finger between the lens that he's using, which is some smoked plastic, and the camera. In fact, you have to do it where your finger is out in front of whatever lens you're using, out in front of the camera, between the sun and the lens or the camera or whatever you're using. Okay, so there we have it. You know, we're all looking at the same sun no matter where we are in the world. There's only one sun that's 150 million kilometres away, or about 93 million miles. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are, we're all looking at the same sun, and if there was something next to the sun, like a second sun or whatever, we should all be able to see it if it's there. And you know, here we are on the 23rd of February 2015. It's about almost 9:30 in the morning, and I'm not seeing it. Now I can film a little bit later on when this light cloud has burned off. I should have clear blue sky later on, and I'll be happy to check that. So there we have it. Today is Monday the 23rd of February 2015. It is 9:23 AM New Zealand Daylight Saving Time, and we've got a little bit of very light cloud at the moment. So I'm filming through a Canon Legria FS200 standard video camera, and as you can see I'm moving around to see if there's anything next to the sun that remains there, and I can't see anything there. You can see a lot of glare from the sun. We've got some lens flares that are moving around as to be expected, and now I'm going to drop in the welder's lens in front of the camera and let the camera adjust itself with the auto exposure. Now as you can see, with the lens fitted in place, we can still see